Hi, I'm Linda from Beyond the Journal, as well as Hack My Journal PLR, and I am creating a tutorial for you today on how to set up your Affinity interface to look just like mine as I show it in all of my tutorials. One of the things that a lot of people have noticed immediately is that I use the light mode for my Affinity interface. And by default, it installs in dark mode. So I'm going to show you how to change it from dark mode to light mode if that's what you would prefer to have, as well as how I set up my toolbars and my studio panels, and how I customize the whole look of my interface so that it's easier for my workflow. And then you can decide if you want to either set this up to look like mine, maybe just so you can go through my tutorials and be able to match things exactly. Or maybe you would like to have this as your interface, for anything else you're doing, or maybe you want to create other layouts for other workflows that you're doing. But I'm going to show you how to do all of that, from the light mode to where I put studio panels to how I change the tools and the toolbar and all of that. I also want to note that I have recorded this tutorial like 4 times now, because I keep finding out that in Affinity version at least 2.1, which is what I'm running right now, they've made some changes that didn't exist at least in 1.10 last year. They came out with 2.0 in November of 2022. I'm recording this in July of 2023, and I wasn't aware of some of these changes, and it was throwing me off while I kept recording it. So I've got more stuff for you on take 4 that I didn't know in take 3. So let's get started with this. First, to show you all of these things, I need to just open any document. So I'm just going to open a US letter. For this tutorial, it doesn't matter what I open. So I'm just going to open that. That lets me get to the entire interface so I can show you, what I need to show you. So the first thing is that, for one thing, my studio panels are in different places. I've minimized what I have open over here, and where they open everything on default for a bunch of studio panels. So I've taken most of them off and rearranged them so it's very minimalist. And I've moved the layers panel over to the left side. And I'm going to come back to that part in just a moment, because the first thing I want to do is show you how to put it in light mode to start with. So there's 2 ways you can get into the system settings for the whole application. You can either go under Edit and go to Settings right here, and then it'll bring up the Settings interface panel. Or you can just click anywhere outside the artboard so that nothing in your Layers panel is selected. And then in the context toolbar up here, it'll change right here, and you can hit Settings. Either way, you're going to get to this screen. Now, I haven't changed a lot of things in here. Most of the changes are on 2 different sections under User Interface and Tools. I'm going to go through them in sequence here. You can feel free to hit pause on this video long enough so you can look at what my settings are and match it to your interface on your Affinity application. Also, I should note, I'm doing this tutorial in Affinity Designer, but this whole process of customizing works identically if you're in Affinity Publisher or Affinity Photo. There might be a few features in the menus and all that are different for that application, but the process of changing things is the same. So first is just general. I don't believe I have changed anything on the screen that I can remember. I may be wrong. There may be something I changed and I forgot. But I think these are at the defaults. It has a scroll bar here, and the only thing you can't see immediately is that I'm set to English. So otherwise you can see everything. You can pause if you want to check yours against mine. Then we can move to color. Again, I don't think I've changed anything on here, so it should be the defaults. Then we can move to performance. Again, I don't think I changed anything on here. Some of it will reflect the computer that I'm on, and so you may see things like your graphics card might be different than mine. So, but that's what I have set there. And this is where you'll find more changes. So under user interface, this is where you can switch it to light mode right here. And then I've also tweaked the slider bars here for the gray levels, for the artboard, for the background, some of the text contrast, and the UI brightness. So I don't know where they are at defaults, and I'm not going to hit the default button now, or I'd have to set it all up again. But you can hit pause and adjust it. You might even want things to be a little more gray or less gray for the contrast things. And I sometimes tweak them over time, but you can line yours up to look the same as mine. And then the only other thing I have checked off on this screen is I've added always show brush crosshair. That's turned off by default. But I found that adding the crosshair on the brushes makes it easier for me to see exactly where I'm going with things. So perhaps at some point they'll change it and it'll become default to have it on, but I'm pretty certain it was disabled by default. And then tools. And I am going to come back to the screen in just a moment because I have some additional comments I want to make. But for the ease of this tutorial, I'll have you look at my settings, and then I'm going to come back to it once I get through the whole set of options here. So you can see that I've made a couple of changes here. And then under shortcuts, I haven't added any shortcuts at this point. I've been pondering a few, but at the time of this recording, I haven't added any shortcuts. So I'm still using all the defaults. Under Assistant, I'm still on the defaults for that. Linked services, they do support linking to Dropbox. So if you do use Dropbox, you can link it here if you'd like to. I think they plan on adding some other services like Apple iCloud and Microsoft OneDrive and Google Drive, but at the moment it's just Dropbox. And under miscellaneous, which is really about resetting things, so there's not really anything to check off or do anything. So the main ones to look at for matching things in my interface to yours is really about changing to light mode right here, adjusting the sliders to get the gray levels that are either the ones I'm using or something you like even better. And then I did brush crosshair here. And then under tools. Now I want to come back to this screen because there's a few things, like for example, use scrubby zoom. In the past, I used to check this off because I thought scrubby zoom meant something specific. And I realized, and I'll tell you how I figured this one out, realized it doesn't do what I thought it did. And ultimately, I chose to not enable it. I believe it's disabled by default. Not really sure, but I turned it off. And I made another tutorial that's already on my YouTube channel. You can go watch that. That's all about scrubby zoom, as well as a whole bunch of different ways to zoom in and out on your work desktop, whatever you've got, whether they're artboards or if you're in photo over there or publisher. So there's lots of things you can do around zooming. And but the scrubby zoom didn't work the way I thought it did, and I'll defer you to my other tutorial to learn exactly what that actually does. There's also use mouse wheel to zoom. Now you can zoom using your mouse wheel without ever changing the setting, but there's a nuance going on. Like if you press on the wheel in the middle of your mouse and you keep pressing down and then you roll the wheel while you're pressing it, you can zoom in and out, and you can move left, right, and up and down and around circles if you want. What they specifically mean here for use mouse wheel to zoom just means if you're not pressing it and you roll it without pressing it, it'll zoom in and out. By default, it'll scroll up and down. Like over here, if I do this, you can see it's moving over here. So, but if I had that enabled, then the scrolling action wouldn't happen. So that's what that means. And there's, all sorts of different things. But you know what? I found that the best source for figuring out what any of these things are, as well as anything here or anything anywhere in the application, and a lot of people overlook it. I went hunting all over the place to find out what scrubby zoom meant by going to YouTube and watching a bunch of videos. I got nowhere because nobody had a video on it. And so turns out the best way to go find out what they mean is go to the help, go down here. This one's a designer, but if you're in publisher, it'll say Affinity Publisher Help, or Affinity Photo Help if you're in photo. But just go on the very top, help one, and it's going to pop up their basically digital version of their manual, and you can find what you want to know about the different features. Like, what does that box, if you check it off, do? So, you can start out introduction, about designer. You can find out what's new in the version. I'm running 2.1, so new features in 2.1. And then, you can go all the way through it. And even down here under extras is settings, and we're going through settings. So this is like where you would find all of that kind of stuff. There's also the keyboard shortcuts are here as well. And there's a lot of really handy information. So don't forget to go into the help pages when you want to know something. Frankly, that was the only way I figured out how Scrubby Zoom worked. And well, now there is a video on YouTube about it. Now, also, you might want to make one change in your settings that's different than mine, depending on what you're more comfortable or familiar with coming from another software. And that's this very top one. Select object when intersects with selection marquee. So that's when you are using your mouse to select a bunch of elements on your artboard or document to select them as a group through using the mouse to encompass them all. By default, Affinity does not have this box checked. So what that means is if you're selecting objects on your artboard, for example, you need to use your mouse to fully encompass the entire object, or it won't be selected. If you're used to using, say, Canva or Cricut Design Space, or there may be other software where they do it a different way by default, you just have to barely touch that object when you're using your selection. And when you let go of your mouse, if you've got it in the range of the selection, it'll be grabbed, even if you didn't fully encompass that object. So if you're used to it working that way, like it does in Canva and Cricut Design Space and so on, you may want to check this box off. I did not check it off, and I never have. I use the default setting on this. I'm more comfortable with the way it's done by default, where I have to fully grab that object completely for it to be selected. And this works better, especially when you get more and more elements that are listed out in your layers panel over here, and you're trying to grab things and maneuver around ones you don't want, that kind of thing. So I don't have it checked. I prefer it this way for my workflow. And but you may want to have that one checked. It would be nice if Affinity put something up like on the toolbar up here where we could toggle that feature on and off depending on what we're doing in the moment, rather than having to go into settings to change it. But at least at the moment of version 2.1, it's inside the settings. So that's something you might want to do different than me. Depends on your preference. So that's that. You can line things up the way you want on your interface as you would like. maybe pick different options that would work better for your workflow. So we're going to close out of this now. And next, I want to go through the studio panels because they're the next most obvious thing that jumps out as being different. So when you install by default, you're going to have 3 sections over here on the right. It's like 3 tiers. And I've got them completely rearranged. I like to have things minimalized so that I don't have a cluttered desktop here. I want to be able to find the things that I need when I want them, and I want them to be in a place where my brain's going to look for them. So if you're trying to find something and you keep looking somewhere else and then go, oh, it's not over here, it's over here, maybe you want to customize your interface to fit the way your brain's trying to find it. So for me, there are 2 panels, and these are studio panels. So if you're not quite sure what the different parts of the interface are, these things are all called studio panels. And I've got these ones open. So I've got transform, and I've got the color picker, color wheel, swatches, strokes, brushes, quick effects, and symbols. Symbols is specific to Affinity Designer. But like in photo, I'll have assets up there instead. So those are the panels, but I've also moved layers way over here. So these are what I keep open, but there's like 3 tiers in here, and layers is like in the middle. There's very little real estate for you to look at all the layers in your layers panel. And it's one of the most important panels. So layers and transform are my 2 most important ones. I probably reference them more than anything else. I like to be able to see all of my layers. I like to know what's on top of what, because the layers panel literally is like layers. I like to use the analogy of a ream of paper, like for your printer, and everything's stacked one on top of the other. And whatever's on the top of the stack is at the most forefront when you're viewing it. Whatever at the bottom is behind. Now, sometimes it doesn't matter if things aren't overlapping, but when you can't find something and you're picking around on your document or artboard, it might be because it's down your layers panel somewhere. But in the layers panel, you can see what order things are in. You can group things easier. You can change the order, slide things around, get straight to the element on your artboard or document that you want, and you can rename things. I recommend renaming your layers, grouping things together that you want to keep together, that kind of thing. So layers is something you're going to use a lot. Transform helps for making sure it's on the right X and Y coordinate when you're trying to line things up. Also, specifying the size of it, if you need to tweak the size of it, change the rotation, and S is for shear. So these are features that you can use quite often. Sometimes you're just trying to correct something that didn't come out quite right when you laid it out on the artboard. So I have those 2 there. Transforms way at the bottom by default, and layers is stuck in the middle, sandwiched in between the top and bottom. So I bring them out, closed out quite a few of them, and only added the ones I like to use a lot. And once you've got things the way you want, and the way to rearrange them really is to just drag them off and they become undocked. We could take, transform and symbols off, for example. Say we didn't want them. I don't know why you wouldn't want transform up, but I could see why maybe you're not into using symbols, and that'd be fine. But you just, undock them, whatever ones you want to move around, and then you can close them out. And then maybe you want to get them back at some point. You can go under window and you can go back, get transform. It'll pop up in the same spot that you closed it out in. And then we can go get symbols, and they're there, and you can redock them. Just slide them over and they'll want to snap in with the other tabs. And you can see where it turned blue here. So if I do this, it'll dock over there and make a new column. If I bring it here, you can see it turns blue. puts it down there. So sometimes it'll put one down here, but but we're going to just put it up here. Oop, get it to snap. Now you can also get to some of the studio panels a second way, not for all of them, but for some of them. Second way of getting there, like for example, if we were doing text, then they can be gotten from here. This will bring up character, and it'll just pop it up somewhere, and this one will bring up paragraph. The last time I had paragraph open, I had it docked with character, so it remembered that. I could undo them, or I could put them back together again, and I could slide this around, and then when I didn't want it, I could close it out. Or if I wanted it docked, I could put it over here, and then it would be there. And you can, sometimes on some of them, you can change right here. You can slide it up and down. It just requires the set above it to be extended enough to kick that in, but we can close that out. Not all of them can be gotten through the context toolbar up here, but some of them can. So the very top one is called the toolbar, and the one right below it is the context toolbar, and then these down here are just called tools. So you get tools, toolbar, and context toolbar, and these are studio panels. Now once you get your studio panels where you want them, there's a way to save them as a preset. Now this is something that I figured out, and part of my 4th time recording this, they have changed it so that now when you save presets, it saves also your tools and your context toolbar up here, or toolbar, not the context one, but just the regular toolbar. And I used to only save the studio panels, so it was throwing me off because I was telling you how to save studio panels and then I'd lose all my tools. It was weird. So let's go and show you about tools and the content and the toolbar at the top, and then I'll show you how to save your presets. Let's start with the tools down here. So if you go under View, you can go to Customize Tools. And these are all the tools that are available, including a little spacer right here. So you can drag things over and drag them back and line them up the way you want. You can put spacers in like I did in different places. You can rearrange them. You can just slide them all around, put them however you want, and get them the way you like. These ones here with the little triangle, that's a flyout menu. That means that this shape here, if I hover, it says rounded rectangle tool. But if I were not in the edit mode for the tools, then if I clicked on the little tiny triangle at the bottom, it would fly out and show all of the other shapes. So you don't need to put everything in here. But some things, even if they're available in the flyout menu, but you're using them a lot, you might prefer to not do the flyout and put them individually. So, but these is my current setup. And I periodically tweak it out as I find that I want them a different layout. So you may watch a tutorial and I've got them in a different order. But that's how you change them. You can change the columns. By default, there's 1 column, so you can make it 2. But get it the way you want. If you hit reset, it'll go back to default. So hit close, and that'll save your changes. And then to change the things up at the top, if you go back to View and do Customize Toolbar. See, this one says Customize Tools, and then this one's Toolbar. That'll bring up this menu. And I've changed some things on this. They do have a whole panel. If I were to drag this thing up, this is all the default ones, and it would replace what I have up there, just to default back. But you can add things individually, or they've got some pre-configured groupings. Now, in the new version, they've added a few little sets of things. So they've got, by default, they have just 3 of these, and now they've got the 4th for an advanced view mode. So I popped that up there. They also added these. These weren't there before. They're very useful for when you're doing SVGs for a Cricut cutting machine or anything where you're doing SVGs and you want to fill holes or separate curves or that kind of stuff. which usually are accessed through menu options, but they made some little shortcuts to go up on the toolbar, and you can get the whole section called, well, this one's also geometry, but this is a second set of geometry, and drag that up there. I decided to put it over here. I don't think I changed anything else, but you can always look at the video. What do you see in my recording here and what's here? And maybe I'll change it periodically too. But that's how you change that one. We'll hit close. Other things you can do to customize as well is if you go under view, you can also turn on other settings like show rulers. I have the ruler on. Show grids if you want to look at grids. Margins, you know, different things like that. So those can be turned on and off. For now, I'm just gonna, oops, I keep going in the wrong one. I'm just gonna leave it with the rulers, but there's different ones. You can also configure the features of what you're showing here. But once you get things the way you want them, then it's a really good idea to save your setup as a studio preset. So if you go under window and just above where the studio panels are, you can see just the word studio, and you can add a preset and you can call it whatever you want to call it. And turns out in the new version, when you set up your preset, it will remember not just where your studio panels are, you know, how you had those laid out. It will now remember which tools you had laid out where, and your toolbar at the top as well. So those are 3 things that it's remembering. It does not remember if you have rulers or grids and that kind of thing turned on, the other things out of this menu. I'll hit cancel. You know, it doesn't save the settings of these things, but just the others. So if you add a preset, you can set up a workflow for yourself for one part of your tasks and then save that, and then you could rearrange your desktop including tools and the toolbar, save it as a different preset, and then you could toggle between different workflows. So that is everything I can think of at the moment. So like I did set up, I added a favorite layout, but also I have a minimalist one, which I set this one so that it would use the same tools in this case and context toolbar, but it got rid of all the studio panels. That is entirely necessary, since if you go to studio, you can also choose hide studio. So if I go back to what I had there, which I called my favorite layout, and then I hit hide studio, and it with the same effect. So, but I was just playing around with saving things. But here's Affinity factory defaults, which I got to turn back on the, whoops, there. So this is what you're used to seeing. So I was able to save it. Those are the tools you see, although it kept it in 2 columns. So you have 1 column, but otherwise that's the default. And but we can just switch back. So that is everything I can think of. And if there are any other things I missed, then I don't know. So covered it all. And if there's anything that you want to add as a comment below the video, that would be very appreciated. Let me know if there's another tutorial that you'd like to have, even if it has nothing to do with setting up your interface, it's just something else. And don't forget to hit the like button. Really appreciate people who hit that like button. It's like saying thank you. I like to hit other people's like buttons when I've watched their videos as well. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel. And I will be back with more tutorials. Thanks for watching.